Hi everyone. Hello.
Hi.
More people. Hi everyone. Good to see you. Nice to see some familiar faces. We seem to have regulars at these workshops, which is lovely. We'll just wait a little bit longer. I'm just expecting a few more people. If anybody hasn't already filled in that Google Docs form, that was you will have got with your confirmation of your booking. If you haven't filled that in, if you wouldn't mind just doing that, I've just put it in the chat now. If you wouldn't mind filling that in, that'd be really useful, please. It's just so that we can collect information about who we're reaching in terms of these workshops. So that would be great if you wouldn't mind. We'll just wait a few more minutes for other people. Bye, Nicola. Hi, good to see you. More waiting to get in. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Sorry, I haven't got a full screen at the moment. Let me try and change it. Nice to see you. Who's speaking?
So it's lovely to have the familiar faces.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
A bit of a following. It's lovely to have regulars joining us. It's great.
I'm hoping you're going to unlock lots of mysteries.
Oh, Phil's the guy for that, I'm sure.
That sounds ominous.
I know, doesn't it just?
I might turn the video off soon because I've got supper to eat. And
don't worry that. Oh, you'll be making us all hungry. I've not had mine yet, so yes. Turn it off. You'll be making us jealous.
you don't want to see me eating, so okay. But I will be still listening, and we'll reach as fast as I can.
Okay, we'll make a start. I think if anybody else joins, I can let them in. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third workshop, which is our final workshop for this spring, but there will be more to come. And we'd really love to hear your ideas about things that we can cover to help you on your journey with net zero and with Eco Church Awards. So please just drop us an email if there's anything that you'd like us to cover in these workshops for the future. It's going to be a slightly different format this evening, so it's a bit more of a clinic where people can have more time and space to ask questions and to discuss things. Yeah, and hopefully we will unlock some mysteries around the energy footprint tool. So if you haven't already signed in using that Google form that was attached to your Eventbrite confirmation. If you could do that before the end of the workshop, that would be really helpful. It's just to help us better understand the people that we're reaching and perhaps not reaching. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be really good. It is in the chat. If you can't see it, I can repost it again. So yeah, it's really lovely to have you all. As I've already said, it's nice to see some familiar faces who seem to be regulars joining us in these workshops, which is really lovely to sort of build those relationships with people. And yeah, and as I said, hopefully we'll be able to disband some of the myths around the and concerns that people have around filling in this energy footprint tool that we use to collect information about the amount of energy that we're using in our churches. So if you have any questions as we go through this evening, please just pop them in the chat. And Phil and I and Peter, who you can also see on screen, will also help you to answer those questions, hopefully. But before I introduce Phil to you, would you mind just popping your name and your organisation or the church that you're from in the chat, please, just so we can see who's here and see if there's anybody else perhaps in your area that you might be able to link up with. But that would be great if you wouldn't mind just doing that, please. Oh, don't worry, Cheryl. It's good that you're here. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Phil Leigh to you, who is, some of you will already know him actually as the Environmental Officer for the Liverpool Diocese, and he's also the lead for the Net Zero Carbon 2030 programme. He also is the head gardener at Bishop's Lodge in Liverpool and will be taking all gardening questions at another event in the future. So keep them jotted down if you want to know more about gardening. But Phil, over to you and the EFT.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'll just do some facts and figures to start with, and then we'll work through the EFT together. So the Energy Footprint tool was first launched in 2020, and it was requested as part of the Synod vote in response to the climate crisis. And the Synod vote challenged the Church of England to reach the target of net zero carbon by 2030. And that was brought down from 2045, which was the original target. The Energy Footprint tool is always a year behind because it requires a full year's worth of billing information. So the idea for the first year on its launch was to produce a footprint for 2019, which the National Church has chosen as a bench year to measure progress against on the 2030 target. 2019 was also chosen because it was the last pre-pandemic year when buildings were in full use. And as we all know, during the pandemic, that put a stop to us using our buildings. So that's been reflected in previous years. 2019 was the last full year's worth of proper use of the buildings. So what do we mean about when we talk about carbon and carbon net zero? The term carbon is often shortened to CO2. And it's generally used in this context as a shorthand for the emissions of carbon dioxide and some other greenhouse gases generated through human activity. And to be carbon net zero requires that greenhouse gas emissions are radically reduced and that the remaining emissions have been offset, for example, through purchasing green energy or through carbon offsetting schemes such as tree planting or other carbon capture schemes. Though the National Church's 2030 target doesn't actually ask us to start offsetting until after 2030. So the aim is to reduce as much as we can up to 2030, continue reducing after then, but then to offset. So the Energy Footprint tool was designed to help us to know how many tons of CO2 are being emitted into the atmosphere through use of our buildings and also through some work-related travel. It's already told us that the majority of that CO2 being released is through heating our energy, heating our buildings, and that's 80% of the energy across the Church of England, and also in our diocese we found the same. Around 80% of the energy is used on heating the buildings, and most of the remaining 20% is used on lighting. And then there's some other bits like cooking and those sort of things in the kitchens. Just to note, last year, well, up until last year, an energy toolkit was also developed along the same lines. The EFT just looks at churches, but there's an energy toolkit now which looks at other building types, and that includes schools, vicarages and offices. And schools is a big proportion of our footprint in the diocese. The results from 2021 from this toolkit showed that the national footprint for 2021 was 410,000 tonnes of CO2. So that's nationally. 31% of this came from churches and church halls. So that amounts to 126,000 tonnes of CO2 nationally. As a diocese, we were responsible for 11,500 tonnes of this. And that was up from 10,700 tonnes the previous year. And of that 11,500 tonnes from our diocese, church buildings emitted 2,800 tonnes. So it's quite a challenge for our churches to get to net zero, 2,800 tonnes. How does filling in the EFT help? Well, for the national church and as a diocese, it tells us footprint as a whole, and our diocese's proportion of that footprint and how we're progressing towards the 2030 target. And as a diocese, we're required to report on this to the national church every year. So we have to give them a report telling them how we're doing. For individual churches, the EFT provides an instant annual report as you fill it in. But obviously you need to fill it in to get this report. And we'll see one of those in a minute. It's very simple. This church report also helps you on your eco-church journey. It helps you answer the questions positively. For some of the questions are around footprinting the building. And just to note, I'm going to now go through an example of the EFT. Just to note, whilst I'm trying to share my screen, that the completion date for the EFT is July the 31st. So it'd be great if you could get it filled in by then. So I'm just going to share, if you could tell me if you can see it or not.
Can I just interject there, Phil, and just say that if anybody wishes to invite other members of their church along, we are going to do another one of these evenings in June. So if there's anybody missing that you feel would really benefit from this, we're going to do the same thing again in June. So don't worry if there's anybody specific who's missed it. Sorry, Phil.
No problem. Thanks. So can you see this now, Emma? Is that so? You get to the EFT through the parish return system. And the parish return systems, therefore, every church every year should be filling it in with their parish finances and their mission statistics, which is difficult to say. But that should be filled in every year anyway. And the EFT energy footprint tool has been added onto that. So we'll put a link into the links going in the chat for that, and we'll circulate them after. You need to log in to there. So this is what you'll see when you come in. I'm already logged in. So I think, yeah, I'm already logged in. So you would have come onto a landing page. It would ask you for an email address and also a password. If you don't have that already, you can get that from Central Services, Liverpool Diocese Central Services. I've pre-warned them, so if they get loads of emails, they won't mind. But before you do that, it might be worth trying to find out who fills in the finances section of the parish returns pages, because they already probably have access to the bills which you need to fill in the EFT, and also they can access the parish return, so you could probably work with them to do it. if you don't know who that might be, and this is probably the treasurer for your PCC, but if you don't know who it is, I can possibly help you find out if you email me. I've got a list of people who filled it in last year, so if your church has got somebody listed against that, I can let you know who that is. Failing that, you can get from central services, you can get a password and your email address registered, but then you'll have to get the bills off whoever gets the bills for the church. So that option of getting the treasurer involved is probably the easiest. If for some reason after this session and coming up to the end of July, you can't fill in the EFT online still, we've got a paper version which you can fill in and send through to me. But it would be great if that was just a really last resort, because obviously it would take a lot of time to fill it in for lots of churches. So that's a real last resort, but we'll circulate that. Once you've logged into this, you'll see this landing page and you go on to enter your data. And you can see listed here, these are the two sections that churches have filled in the past, and now this bit's been added on here. And then you go down here and you can put your church's name in there, which will bring it up onto the screen, and then you just click on your church. I'm not going to go into those churches. I've set up a demonstration church, an example church, I've called it. And you can see here, at the moment, it's 0% complete and it's not being submitted. And here's the carbon footprint below, it's all empty. If I'd done it last year, you would have had some results in here to compare against. So now simply click on enter data. The first question it asks you is how many buildings you'd like to enter data for. And what this is actually really asking you is how many buildings have meters attached to them. So if you've got a church and a church hall, but the energy if the electric only goes through one electric meter and the gas through one gas meter, you only need to put down one building. If you've got more than one meter, so each building is metered differently, then you can put in two. I'll just do that to show what happens. So you'll get two boxes for each question now. So in this box, you could say put church, and in this one, I'll put that in anyway. And this one, you could put church hall. And then each time you get a question, it'll ask you for each of those. So for the church, you're probably going to have electricity and gas. Some might have oil, but rural parishes sometimes have oil instead of gas if they're not on the gas. You could do the same for this building. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to delete that building just for speed. So that's changed it back to one building up there. I've got electricity and gas going into the church. So just click next. And then it's going to ask you about energy types. So primary heating fuel. If it's a gas boiler, you click on gas. If you put oil before and it was an oil burner, that would be listed here. But because I didn't click it, it's not on the list. So, and if you just have electric heating, you'd click on electricity as your main source. Electricity supplier, you've got a list here. These are all classed as green suppliers by the EFT. Every year they assess the different suppliers and put them into a list that they find acceptable for this. You might have another one here, or you might be you might have another one here. If you click on that, it gives you a drop-down box to specify who that is. But if it's not on this list, it's probably not a green supplier. So I'm going to click bulb because I know that's green electricity. Yes, it is a green tariff, so I'll click on there. You might be unsure, or you might know it's not. So now it's asking for electricity purchased. This is in kilowatt hours. You get that off your bills. What you do is take your December bill for 2022 and subtract your January bill from it, and then the remainder you would put in here. So I'm going to put 22,000 kilowatt hours there. If you haven't got that, but you know how much it costed to purchase your electricity, you could put that in there. You could put it in there anyway, even if you do know that, but you don't need to. And this is more accurate. If you were just putting in the cost of it, then it would give you, it would kind of predict how much you've used by knowing how much you're costing at the moment. Same again for gas supplier. So these are considered as green gas suppliers. I'll pick one of those for now. Again, you can do other or none. Is your tariff green? Yes. Gas purchased. Same again. I'm going to do kilowatt hours, 80,000. So I have to click kilowatt hours. It might be different on your gas. You might have cubic meters or hundreds of cubic feet. So you just have to be sure that you know what it is that you're putting in there. You could put the cost of the gas in if you didn't know that again. Once you've done that, click next. And now this part is optional, really. It's about travel expenses, which is a really small proportion of the footprint. But if you know this, please do enter it. If you don't worry about it. So just click on sure if you don't know. If you do know, put in the number of miles that were claimed or the cost or both. Now this bit, it'd be great if you could fill it in, but don't lose any sleep over it. Building footprint might be pre-populated if some of the buildings already have the footprint in the system. If it's not, then you can have a guess at it. The National Church says that an average sized church is between 300 and 400 square meters. So I'm going to put 350 in. A very small church would be around 150 square meters, and a large church could be around 750. So you can have a guess at that. If you want to be a little bit more accurate, you could go onto Google Earth. And there's a very simple tool to use on Google Earth to calculate the area of your building. But just it doesn't have to be really accurate. The next bit is about attendance. So you put in your Sunday attendance. I'm going to put in 80 people come on a Sunday. And there's one weekday service, so I'm going to put 80 in there as well. And then it asks for a ballpark estimate of any other users of your church or the halls, which would be meetings or clubs or scouts, guides, anything like that. I'm going to put in 100 there. And then just a guesstimate of the average hours that the church and hall are used per week. So I was thinking probably 10. If we have a Sunday of 2 hours, a weekday of 2 hours, and then 3 clubs and meetings. So I'll put 10 in there. Click next. And there you can see 100% complete. Once you've got to 100% complete, you can submit it. If it's not 100% complete, you just click the arrow and go back to where you've missed something. If you can't get all the information at once, if you leave and then go back to it, all the information will still be there unless you press reset data. If you press that, all your data goes. Once it's filled in and you're happy with it, press submit, and then you can forget about it until next year. And once you've done that, it gives you this instant report. As I say, if you had to filled it in last year, you'd have some numbers here to compare against, but it's telling me that this year, or actually 2022, we used 21.8 tons. We emitted 21.8 tons. Because we're on green tariffs for electric and gas, that vastly reduced it down to 2.6 tons. So that just shows how important it is that you go onto green tariffs wherever you can. It's difficult to do at the moment if you're not already on one because of the fluctuation in prices and those sort of things. But as soon as the opportunity arises, if you can get onto green tariffs, it really reduces your footprint. And then this little bit, it's a bit like what you see on your fridge. and it just places you amongst other churches. So round here is an average church. So for net zero emissions, which includes your green tariffs, that puts you around about the middle 10%. And that's the same for emissions per square metre, around about the middle. But because the building is used, plenty of use in the buildings, that puts you right at the top, because per person, not a great deal of CO2 is being emitted into the atmosphere. So that's great. And then down below there, you've got CO2 emissions per square metre for the year, which is 8.5. And underneath that, there's a list of links and all sorts of things that you can do to help reduce your carbon footprint. Loads of information on the National Church's website, really great information on there. We've also got information on our Diocesan website and on Face for Change website with our knowledge platform that's being developed, and with specifically things that are relevant to our diocese we're putting onto that platform, so that you don't have to wade through loads of information. And that's about it. That's how you fill it in. You'll end up with this report, and once you've got that, you can work on reducing your footprint. So back to Emma for any questions.
Fab, thank you, Phil.
I'll stop
Anybody
sharing.
want to put the hand up or just unmute yourself? I haven't got any questions in the chat, but if anybody would like to ask Phil anything about that, Becky?
Yeah, can I ask, I just didn't really understand when you were saying about putting in your energy usage for the year, you said something like get the December bill and minus the January one. I didn't know I didn't understand what that meant. Which is that of the same year? But I don't even understand why you would do that.
Yeah, because that would you could either add up the use for every month through the year, or you can take, if you get your December bill at nearly into 2023 December, and your January bill at the other end of the year, and you get your meter reading off of there to see off both, and subtract the January one from the December one. That'll give you how much energy you use throughout the year.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry, I thought you meant the charge and the cost of it. That's when I was getting confused.
Well,
Okay.
well, yeah, that would. Oh no, that wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't.
No, would it? No. That's why I was really confused.
Yeah,
so that's
sorry.
Right, the actual usage. So it would be. Oh, yeah, I don't know.
So it's
I think
listed.
Church knows how to do it anyway, so that's okay. Yeah.
It's listed in kilowatt hours on the bill. So if you should be able to just take the kilowatt hours from December, subtract the kilowatt hours from January, and then what you have left is how much you use through.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about you're taking December 22 and you're minusing January 22.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That gives you a full year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheryl, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I don't. This is clearly specifically designed for the Church of England. Do you know whether other denominations have got anything similar? I don't go to a Church of England church, so I don't know whether I'm a Baptist by.
Yeah, I don't think there is, but there's Climate Stewards have a footprint tool that can help you with that sort of thing.
Can I ask another question? So it was just about those so-called green suppliers that were identified. How are those identified? Because I know there's some controversy about whether some of them are really green or whether they're, the criteria are a bit debated.
The national team are going through them, and they collate that list. So we're just going with that list at the moment.
Right.
So I know there are controversies around some of them. And Bulb is on its way out, isn't it? That's now going over to Octopus. So
Bulb is gone, or going, yeah. So we're now 100% Octopus at church.
Yeah, I've had the same.
Others that I would vouch for 100%. I mean, at home we're Ecotricity. There we have 100% renewables, gas and electricity from them. And they're even growing gas now from grass, about to start supplying this summer.
Yeah.
So there, but if you Google the best eco energy suppliers or something, you'll come up with a whole list. And if you have time to go into those, you can actually sort out the sheep from the goats that way.
Yeah. Those ones in the list are what the EFT recognises, but I think as time goes on, that list will be refined. I think because it's quite a new thing. I think there's room for refinement.
Yeah.
There's also Ethical Consumer, which is online. You can actually get you can subscribe to a magazine, and our church have done that. And then we have a login so we can go, but I think Ethical Consumer is really good as well. Yeah, they're really good. I'll put the link for Climate Steward, so you can do your own footprint. But I'll also put the Ethical Consumer link in as well for you. Nicola's just asked, is it by calendar year, Phil?
It is, but as I say, it's always 1 year behind. So the EFT at the moment is asking for 2022, and the results that I said were from 2021, because you need the full year. So at the moment we don't have a full year. So I'm making it more complicated.
Yeah.
The EFT is always a year behind, so we can't provide all the bills for 2023 yet, so it's asking for 2022, and it is by calendar year.
Peter, did you want to interject?
Yeah, sorry, it was just on that point. It was just also, when you are reading your bill, make sure it's an actual meter reading, not an estimated meter reading, because that could be somewhat out. So it's basically someone just read the meter themselves and sense check what the bill's saying.
Phil, I've had a lot of trouble with parish buying in the last year because we decided to come out of the basket which parish buying organised. I think it's with Total. And we came out because we weren't particularly happy about Total. But we've had a dickens of a job getting new contracts this last year. We've got them with British Gas Light, which I think has green tariffs for the electric. I don't know how green it is for the gas. But are you aware of how parish buying is helping parishes with this energy tool or not? Because I suspect they're not. Because I think everybody that they put into the basket is always with Total. And I don't think Total are very green.
That is another discussion, which the DEOs have taken up this discussion in their network as well.
Right.
At the moment, we're still working on the basis that parish buying supplies green energy.
Right. Well, they got us fixed up with British Gas Light, and we've got one with Positive Energy. But I wish I'd come out of parish buying and just gone straight for Octopus or something like that. I think that probably would have been better.
Right, yeah.
But the trouble is, with parish buying, you're locked into a contract, very often for 2 years, and you have to decide 6 months in advance if you're going to get out of the contract. So it's a highly complex business that if you're actually working through the parish buying system. I feel fairly bruised really after trying to cover 3 buildings and several different contracts. It's been a very difficult year.
That's a shame. Sorry, Christine?
I said it was awful. I was just commiserating.
Thank you.
We had the difficulty at first when I first started trying to press that we had greener energy. I can't remember who we were with before, but we had 2 different arrangements, one with gas, one with electricity, and they weren't at the same time. So we managed to change one of them. I think it might have been gas. But then we had to wait another 15 months before that that account was stopped and we could move to the other. In the meantime, we had started with bulb and then that went bust. So it has been tricky, but we've got there now. So we've got both with Octopus, and so obviously it is renewed at the same time. So it makes it much simpler, but it was a bit tricky to start with.
Yeah, it's all online as well, isn't it, Octopus? So you can easily look at your bills and all those sort of things.
Yeah,
They are great. We're with Octopus and they are really good. Nicola's got a hand up, but just quickly, Nicola, if you don't mind, somebody just put in, do you also work out CO2 emissions for from the vicarages? I don't think we do we, Phil?
Yeah, there is part of the tool is to do that, but it works it out. We're not able to ask for all the bills for vicarages because it's personal information. So that is using energy performance certificates, which are being downloaded onto the system each year. And that gives energy performance certificates give an indication of what the bill would be.
How do people go about getting hold of one of those, Phil?
Energy performance certificates. You go onto the government website. If you well, we'll put a link up. I'll try and find it whilst Peter's on, but it's on a government website and you literally put in the postcode and it'll tell you if there is one for that property. Some of the vicarages don't have it yet, but the diocese is trying to put that right at the moment.
Well, Nicola, thank you for being patient. Sorry.
I'm not sure whether you'll hear me very well because I'm in a motorway services.
It's fine, we can hear
Going
you.
back to that vicarages point, our vicarages are owned by the diocese. So should it be attributable to the diocese or to the actual individual parish?
To the vicarage, it doesn't get added onto the church. So the church is separate.
Okay.
From the
And the
vicarage.
church and the church hall, we have an LEP, ecumenical partnership. So we've got Methodist and COV in the partnership.
Right.
So how do we, I mean, obviously the billing is related to the buildings, but in terms of how we relate the emissions to the partnership,
That's
are you capturing that information in another part? I'm not familiar with the stats. Is it already picked up in the other bits of the statistics?
I think we won't be able to go to that depth. The EFT certainly doesn't go to that depth. It would be quite a calculation, wouldn't it, to work out what proportion was for which?
Yeah, there's quite a high proportion of ecumenical partnerships in Eco Church, though. So it's something that will need to be considered.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
If you look on Eco Church, you'll find there's quite a wide range of LEPs.
Great.
Anne, you got a question?
Yes, please, although we're not covered by the diocese, but I'm just curious as to why you are concentrating on the church building, when if you concentrated on the congregation, there would be a much greater carbon saving.
Very good point. We did ask that on the travel point, at least, why don't we include travel to and from church? But it wasn't included in the up to 2030. It might be included after 2030.
But people's domestic consumption will be far higher than the church building, and there would be more influence on that than through the church building.
That is one of the reasons that we're working with Eco Church, is that helps to spread it out further into the community.
Yeah, and Eco Church distinguishes those two, doesn't it? Because the church buildings is two sections. Well, buildings and land is two sections, and personal lifestyle is a separate section.
That's it. So the EFT is quite kind of technical. The Eco Church side of things is more hearts and minds, isn't it? So it's extending that benefit out into the community, but we can't capture that through the EFT.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully Peter might go to give us some more information on that, and as Peter speaks to us a bit later. Does anybody else want to ask Phil anything, Ricky?
Phil, you said that the diocesan figure, however many thousand tons it was was worse in 20 than it was in 2019. Is that right? And I understand that it's likely that 2021 is more than 20. In other words, we're still going up. Is it anticipated that if the majority of churches are filling in the tool and we discover that we haven't actually made any progress in reducing the carbon footprint, that there's going to be something really radical done to try and get down to net zero by 2030? Because on the figures, we look like we're a long way away. And I'm just wondering, I mean, it seems to me the only kind of radical stuff is that we stop heating big buildings for very small numbers of people. And that's going to be really difficult. But until we start doing that kind of thing and really cut our heating bills, or get a lot of money and manage to get churches onto heat pumps or something like that, there's very little chance that we're actually going to get down to net zero by 2030. I mean, if we're still getting worse at the moment before we start the journey downwards, we're going to have to do something really very radical, aren't we?
Yeah, the part of that increase is because we're measuring more things. So schools and vicarages, I don't think they were included in 2020, but they were in 2021. Churches, actually, we did a footprint for churches in 2019 and it was 3,800 tons. So churches have actually gone down since.
Right.
But then we've had the pandemic, which has stopped people using the churches. So we need to look at it as different aspects of the estate. And also, once we get full use, a year full of full use, we'll know better how things are going. Yeah. But it's a massive challenge. There's no getting away from it. Yeah. And we did talk about that, though, didn't we, Ricky, when we were talking about your buildings, using the hall instead of the church for the colder months, at least, if we could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hopefully this leads. Sorry, Ricky.
That's all right.
As you say, this leads nicely into me introducing Peter Owen to you, who is the Chief Executive of Energy Progects Plus, who are an independent social enterprise and registered environmental charity that have been operating since 1995. Their aim is to empower members of the community to take action on reducing their energy bills, carbon emissions, and to reduce levels of fuel poverty in Merseyside and Cheshire. So, Peter, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and hello to some known faces there that who know about us and what we do. And also we did some carbon literacy training a couple of years ago. So, for example, I know Ricky's church took part in that as well. So it's we've worked alongside Faith for Change on different projects for quite a number of years as well. I'm conscious that not everybody's in our patch, so I will talk some schemes that we're delivering, but I'll also reflect on where they might be similarly provided elsewhere. It's interesting to me. I mean, I read the report, the EFT report, the national report, and I was looking at the numbers, how some dioceses had reduced their numbers, but Liverpool's had increased, apart from the church buildings themselves. But also, it did seem to me that a lot of it actually is around the schools, isn't it, rather than the church buildings. So what Phil was saying there about analysing against different buildings and what have you is quite important. And interesting enough, the tool itself is pretty much what we would be saying at that individual level as well. You're talking about measuring your use and your impact initially so that you can get your baseline, and that's either using your fuel bills, your kilowatt hours, or your expenditure. It's quite dangerous, I would suggest, to in this current position to be using your expenditure, because fuel prices have been so sky high and volatile. The real number you should be using, if at all possible, is actual kilowatt hours usage, because that's the true measure. And of course, on a domestic level, energy performance certificates, as again Phil was saying, but I think most of the population don't realise that energy performance certificates are public domain. I can go on and look at, if you've got an EPC, I can go and look at your home and your energy performance. I don't need your permission. It's there on the website. I can just put postcodes in and choose houses. And in fact, that's how a lot of sort of government grant schemes for low-income households, that they've basically used that data, they've data mined it, and then targeted households with poor performing properties in specific areas. But on a more positive note, we also do use that information so that we can identify people who we think might benefit from our support and services. The EPC also does give you an estimate of energy use, and then you can correlate that between your own personal use, because it uses what's called a standard assessment procedure. It's standard occupancy. So for a typical household, all the EPCs will be using the same thing. But if your expenditure and your usage is grossly above what the EPC suggests, then you might want to be thinking about that quite carefully. But if you're less than, or you're using less, then you might also be considering, okay, maybe you're quite a lot more efficient. But then the EPC is a good tool to review. It does give you a summary of what insulation levels you've got, the glazing, the heating system you've got, and the controls. So it gives you an opportunity to say, well, okay, where am I using my energy? And again, as Phil said, it's through the EFT. Most of our heating, most of our energy use is on heating, and expenditure is on heating, and then sort of lighting and cooking are the other two key aspects of it. Hot water's in there as well. But you can just do your own personal audit of your home, and you don't need to be a sort of a David Attenborough or a sort of a serious scientist. It's pretty much common sense. You should know where it is. If you can't turn it off easily or automatically, then you'll be looking at wastage, because you need that dynamic. It's time and temperature control for most things is actually what we're aiming for. So review how you're using the energy, and then consider, well, how might I be able to reduce it? And that's where organizations like ourselves can then step in, because you'll be saying, well, okay, how can I get a better, more efficient heating system? And we can talk about the different controls that might be available. More efficient boilers. We can identify alternative heating sources. So again, fuel switching or system switching to air source heat pumps or something away from a gas or solid fuel type system. So there's lots of conversation to be had around that. Explore the options. You've then got to consider, well, okay, how do I actually implement this? How do I afford it? If I'm fortunate to have some savings and what have you, I might want to invest it in the property. If I'm on a low income, and this is where the concept of fuel poverty comes in, it's the inability to heat your home adequately at an affordable cost. Its definition has changed over the years. It used to just be dead easy. It was, if you had to spend more than 10% of your household income on your fuel bills, then you were in fuel poverty. The problem was, if you lived in a very large house, or just put the heating on 24/7 and open the windows, your fuel bills were excessive and very wasteful. But you could still be considered in fuel poverty because they were more than 10% of your fuel bills. So the government has now introduced, and this is where the EPC comes in, concept of, it's called Leigh. It's low income, low energy efficiency, Leigh. So the low energy efficiency is an EPC rating that's poor, and then the low income is it's around sort of median income levels, and so that it truly reflects a relative nature of income. But it's actually quite complicated, not easy to describe to people. So we're still using the 10% a lot of the time, because people can grasp that. But in terms of taking the action, it can be quite expensive. If you live in a Victorian, Edwardian solid wall property, and you want to do external wall insulation, you can be looking at £10,000 to £15,000, maybe more, depending on how big the property is, to insulate the home. Just doing a straightforward boiler swap, gas boiler for gas boiler, like for like, though a more efficient boiler, you're still looking at sort of £2,000 to £2,500 So that's possibly beyond the means of lots of fuel poor households. So we tend to people tend to do those as a distress purchase rather than a planned activity. And that, again, going back to what we were talking about forward planning, the 2030, 2035 targets, we've now got to start putting in place, how am I going to get to it? And we've talked about, through this process, maybe talking with the congregation about the energy performance of their homes and their transport and what have you. But we've got to start engaging with people, because if we just try to say to people, you need to spend £10,000 on your home, the first thing is, well, I haven't got £10,000. So we've now got to start thinking, well, okay, in a few years' time, will I have £10,000? Can I be putting money aside now? We're expecting some alternative financial packages, mortgages to be coming into play as the years go on. But it's, I mean, I imagine I've been saying that for 20 years now. But we're getting closer every year, shall we say? But it does need, we're talking absolute, hundreds of billions of pounds will need to be invested in the domestic properties of the UK in order to enable the country to, or the UK to achieve its carbon net zero targets and the like. And the money just isn't there. So we do need to start thinking about it. And I think that's where, on an individual level, that's where it's extremely difficult. And I think this is where we need to start talking about community level activity. And that could be, I know you were talking about the parish buying, the concept of group purchasing. It's good because it means that people can join together, and through aggregation of demand, of need, and purchasing, you might be getting better prices. You might be getting creating a critical mass of local contractors, improving employment prospects for local people, if you see what I mean. At the moment, it's very, very fragmented, and there's some big players out there, and they're basically mopping up the big projects. And then you've got some niche players who are just doing it. But we are very sure we are hundreds of thousands of trained installers short of the need to achieve the scale that we need to operate at. Huge opportunities. So if we can help within our communities around improving, as say, the employment prospects, improving the economic status of people, there's a lot of positives around that. It's just trying to get it kick-started. So one of the things that we've done, like I said, working with Face Change and other organisations, we can work with, we approach areas, we target areas, we engage with community groups and what have you, and just try and create a word of mouth and a greater conversation, shall we say, from which we see where we can go. We do talks to groups. We'll go out and we'll attend community events with our advice service. We get funding from various places. One of our main funders at the moment is slightly bittersweet, because it's good for us because we've got a project called Warm and Well, which covers Merseyside and Cheshire, but it's funded through what's called the Energy Redress Scheme, which sounds quite good, but actually that's the fines that the utilities have had to pay for being rubbish, or dare I say, it's even worse than rubbish. So they, in the old days, they would be fined, and that would go into sort of central government coffers. About 3 years ago, they turned it into something more beneficial and created this energy redress scheme. So every time you see, I don't know, I think British Gas last year was fined like £10 million or something. That money goes into this redress scheme for community organisations, charities to bid into, to take activity. And I think that's one opportunity for church groups, or properly constituted groups anyway, to be able, they can bid into it if you're a charity or a social enterprise, or aligned to, that's an opportunity, because they're looking for projects that engage with the community to reduce energy demand. We're also funded indirectly by British Gas, through the British Gas Energy Trust. They have their own energy trust, and they fund organisations to provide fuel debt, energy efficiency advice. and we have a project that's launched in October that covers just Liverpool. But there's about 50 of those projects around the UK. I know there's some in London and elsewhere. And we literally will help people who are really struggling with their fuel bills. They're in fuel debt, they're behind other payments, and we can apply for grants to get debt written off, or just possibly help with fuel vouchers or something if they're on a prepay and they've literally got no money on the lights are going to go out. So we're working very much at that intense end of people who are really struggling. But we're also talking to people who who have got money to invest as well. So we cover the whole gambit. And then we have another project which is a national scheme, and this just might be of interest to people who aren't sort of Merseyside and Cheshire. And that's called Leap Local Energy Action Partnership, and that's a national scheme. If you Google Leap, LEAP, you'll find that it operates up and down the country, and I know it operates in London and sort of the Midlands and what have you, and that will provide home visits to people who want some advice in the home. It'll offer simple, what we call easy measures. So if there's a bit of draft proofing on some wooden windows or doors, radiator panels, LED light bulbs, we'll install them, replacing older, less efficient bulbs. So you can see the practical measures to reduce energy use, and therefore, obviously, it all contributes to the carbon savings as well as the fuel bill savings. Yeah, and again, we've got 20 or 30 other projects as well, and we're not alone. Sort of. I think I saw somebody from Wiltshire that is on the call. So there's likes of the Centre for Sustainable Energy. Or is it just your name? I apologise. It's not Margaret from Wiltshire. It's Margaret Wiltshire. Sorry. But yeah. So there's down in the southwest. There's the Centre for Sustainable Energy. Up in the northeast, there's there's Hartlepool Energy. There's Peterborough Energy Centre. That sort of stuff. There's organisations like ourselves dotted around the country. And in London, I know the Energy Saving Trust just launched about 6 months ago a sort of a London-wide energy advice service. I know that because one of my senior management left us to go and join them to be their marketing guru, which was their gain and our loss. But so again, there are organisations up and down the country who can assist, and the councils themselves, of course, may or may not have an energy team. In our area, some of the councils do, some don't. We have service level agreements with some councils to provide those services. But I'm a real fan of. Thanks for putting apply for leap.org.uk in there and in the chat, because that's a really useful program. But I'm a big fan, and we want to explore with our Warm and Well project, and possibly we're looking at a climate fund bid, working with Faith for Change, and we'll be looking for community engagement activities, so that we can maybe join the two together. Because I do know we did a project with Faith for Change in about, 2005, called Parish Power, and that was actually looking at the vicarages on the Catholic Diocese of Liverpool, and we were doing energy advice to those and seeing how we could improve the energy performance of those. But the idea then was to use that as a centerpiece to then say, well, okay, we're looking at the church building. How can we have a conversation now about your own buildings without sort of being critical or anything like that? It's just a question of using it as a means to engage with people. And certainly, I say our patch is Merseyside and Cheshire. We're very, very keen to to engage with any groups or what have you want to do that. Any parishes and the like. The other thing that I mean, something as simple as if you've got a poster, somewhere where you can put a poster up, you can help us, and maybe we can help your users to take advantage of it. I'm struggling now to find out where share screen is, so I can just share the.
I've added your poster into the chat.
Oh, perfect! Yeah,
you can click on it and
Yeah.
Fine, that.
Okay.
Just where
No,
Peter, it's 7:15 and
no, it's fine. Well, that was literally
Sorry.
my closing thing is, here's the poster. If you want us to give you some posters and you want to stick them on the wall, that's just it's a benign activity, but it may actually sort of help your community to actually take action.
Yeah,
And I'll shut up. Sorry.
No, not at all. No, that's great. If you want to see if you can find screen sharing and put that poster on, that's great. Is there anybody who's got any questions at all for Peter? I know there was a couple in the chat. Cheryl, you've asked about the post about the body that takes fines from the energy. Oh, I've lost it now. The energy fines. I'm assuming that was Warm and Well. Was it, Peter?
I'm not sure I'm not sure who warmandwell.co.uk is. Our project is called Warm and Well. So if you go onto our website, you'll find our project.
The one I was thinking of, you said, about the fines that the energy companies go into a big pot and then organisations can bid for funds for initiatives.
Yes, that's the Energy Saving Trust. That's the Energy Redress Scheme.
Okay. Energy Redress Scheme.
Yeah, and the Energy Saving Trust is effectively the managing agent of that. But and they have, I think it's quarterly bidding rounds. I'm not quite sure when the next bidding round is, but I mean, again, through if you're going to share some stuff after the event with participants, then we can find out when. Certainly send a link to it. Yeah.
If people need to go, I know we said we were going to do an hour, but if people want to stay around and ask questions and chat, then you are very, very welcome, and this will stay open for that. If you need to rush off and get your tea and sort things out, then thank you so much for joining. I will put, this is being recorded, so I will post this out to you in an email, and all the links that we've shared this evening as well, and perhaps a few more from Peter. I'll collate those at the end. But I certainly will send all that stuff out. But if people want to hang out around and ask Peter some questions, Peter, I'm sure you're okay, aren't you, for another?
Yeah. No.
If people want to, so unmute yourselves and ask questions if you would like to. Kath. Oh, where's Kath gone? She disappeared off my screen. Oh, she was waving. I thought she was putting a hand up. Margaret.
No, I'm not in Wiltshire. I'm actually.
Sorry about that.
I'm in Blackburn, and I
right.
wondered if you know of any outfits like yours in this up here. It's still Lancashire, but it's East Lancashire.
Yes, yeah. I know LEAP operates in some parts of Lancashire, but I'm not sure whether it covers Blackburn. But I mean, just dropping them an email would yes. find that out. So the council themselves historically were very active in energy efficiency advice and support. So it might be worth speaking. Look, trying to find out who the energy officer is. If I do come across the energy officer, I'll share it. Just to help you along there.
Thank you.
Bill?
If there are any obvious places that churches could go looking for money, that would be really helpful if you could share those with us.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Diane's nodding. Yeah,
that's the real issue we've got, is raising money to put these measures into churches. So if you ever come across anything, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time it's the capital, isn't it? That's the challenge, and both that's on our homes, but also on not just church buildings, but schools, council buildings, and what have you. But we're always keeping our eye open for capital funds. But and if we do find something, we can share that out.
Thank you.
Nicola, you got your hand up?
Yes. So referring back to the earlier comment about numbers, I presume it's the numbers averaged over a week. So some patterns of service might be monthly, but you take the average over the time period.
You, Phil?
Sorry, was that going back to the EFT?
That was for you.
Yes. In terms of the numbers may vary week on week. So do you take an average over the month or whatever to get your weekly average?
Yeah, it just needs to be, it's only got to be rough. You don't have to worry too much.
Yeah, and then the other point relating to someone's comment about using the building less, the other option is to try and get more people in the building to use it more, which is some of the things that come up in the climate resilience workshops that are also going on in the synod, to actually make better use of the building for a wider range of people. You won't change your figures per metre squared, but you will per person per metre squared.
Yeah, very good point.
Thank you.
Can I jump in on that one as well? Just in terms of using the buildings more. Obviously, this subject matter on the climate emergency is a subject matter that actually can draw people together. So, for example, I live in Warrington, but I'm really fortunate. 100 yards from me is the local youth and community centre. But every month they have a repair cafe there. You know, so it's once a month, but it's actually bringing people together. Obviously to get the lawnmower fixed and what have you, but they're good examples, aren't they, about how the environmental movement can bring maybe some more use to an underused building.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing if there's any more.
There was a question in there, has any experience with almshouses? I don't know what that means, the physical structure or the historical.
Well, that came from me because I've just literally come from an almshouses meeting, and one of the agenda items that cropped up was about the bills for the residents and trying to improve the energy efficiency of the buildings, and often they aren't recently built, so there's the similar issues to the ones you have with churches in terms of trying to improve the
one of the challenges about
bills down and save the climate at the same time.
Yeah, and the thing about historic buildings as well. I mean, I always picture almshouses as sort of almost medieval or certainly 19th century buildings. You're looking at different construction type there as well. You might be looking at sort of different types of mortar and plaster and what have you. So it's not the same solution in terms of banging in some insulation in there as you would with a modern building. So you have to be very careful.
Four different ages of building on the same site. So
yeah. So it does become,
and several different forms of heating across the site as well. So
yeah. You can actually, if you're not careful and have professional, in terms of historic buildings, get professional guidance, you could actually do a lot more damage than
well, we've got listed on the status, so we'd have to go through that, but also you made the point of, I think, in your talk, that one of the key things is to think about the insulation as almost as a foundation for what else you do.
Peter, Nicola, you'd asked if you could contact Peter away from here. Would you, Peter, are you happy for me to share your work email so people can get in touch? Things that you're running. Okay, I'll share that, Nicola. I'm going to send out my email with this recording and all the links from this evening. I'll put Peter's email address. Thanks for doing that, Peter. That's really kind to share that. Anybody else want to ask anything to Phil or to Peter before we finish?
It's like organising it.
Well, can I compliment the EFT, because I read the report and I think it's a really useful tool, and actually it will make a big difference, because now that you can see, I'm looking at all of the dioceses across the country, and you can see how the different areas are performing, but that starts to create then a whole opportunity for different areas to collaborate and consider what might be going on. And when we're talking about where can you get funding, all of a sudden, if you're aggregating, the scale starts to become attractive to bigger funders, whereas when you're small, you try to scrap around for funds that you can't bid for £500,000 because you don't need it. But if you can aggregate it to that becomes a huge opportunity. So I thought the report was good, and I think it's a huge opportunity.
We are in the Northwest. The Northwest Diocese is the DEOs are working together to look at how we can work on that, building that aggregation, especially with schools. We've got a company called DBE Services who look at the schools in the Northwest, and that's really helpful.
I think that's just proved, doesn't it? how important it is that people get these figures sent back in the parish returns. And I think because it's felt like such a big deal and people have felt concerned, I don't know where to get the information, I don't know where to start. I think that's why we've done this evening, is so that people can get that information. I mean, it was so good to see how easy it was actually to fill in that, and for you to go through it step by step, Phil, I think was brilliant. But the more of that information that we can get back, then like you said, the more people will be interested in what it is that we're trying to do, and then that funding will come in. So I think this has been a really useful evening, and as I said earlier on, we're hoping to repeat this again before that form needs to be in by the end of July. So we'll do this again. So if people want to come back and hear all about it again and see that form being filled in again, then you're very welcome to do that. But tell other people who perhaps feel this is too big a task for them to do, but actually it is fairly straightforward. But I will put on the email addresses and the links that Phil's given so that you can access that, the parish returns login and the email for central services, so that people can actually find out and who it is they need to get that information from. So I will add all that as well. Anything else to add to that, Phil, about the importance of this?
No, you've said it very well there. Just say to Nicola, I'm happy to be that helpline for now and until something formal is there. So just any questions at all, just email me. I'll always reply to that.
Oh, thanks, Phil. I'll add your email address because perhaps some folk might not have that, your email address. So I'll
just anything to get those in by 31st of July. The more we can get in, the better.
Better. Diane, go on, you waved at me then. You going? See you tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Oh no, great to see you all.
Thank
I think
you.
we've probably come to a natural end, haven't we? Lovely to see you all. Peter, thanks so much for your time, and Phil, and for everybody else that came online. Keep in touch and please let us know of any other workshops that will be useful for you on this journey, and we'll do our best.
Well done, Emma.
Thanks ever so much. Take care. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.